Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we're creating a watercolor feather directly in Procreate. So what you see on screen is exactly what we're going to be creating together. The color palette is free as always. Just tap on the link in the video description and you can download and install it. We'll be using one free brush, which is my mono weight brush, as well as my paid set of watercolor illustration brushes to complete our feathers. So I'll leave links to both of those in the video description as well. I'm going to create a brand new document that's 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels at 300 dpi. I am working in the display P3 color profile. If you are on an older iPad and don't have access to that color profile, just make sure you're using the default sRGB color profile. Okay, I've got my brand new canvas all set and ready to go. I do want to mention that this is a more advanced tutorial, so we're going to be using a bunch of different watercolor methods for this, and we're going to start by sketching out our feather first, and then we'll apply all those techniques. So in order to sketch our feather, we will be using our sketching pencil brush, which is part of the watercolor illustration brush set. I'm going to start by using black, so double tap where black is and you will get true black. And now we're just going to sketch out the shape of our feather. This layer is not going to be a part of the final artwork at all. It's just for you to reference and build upon as you're creating your feather. So I'm just going to draw a curved line up. If it helps to look at a reference photo, definitely feel free to do that. I'm kind of going off of memory here. So this is going to be the main shape of my feather. All right, I can move it into position. I'm going to rotate it just slightly. I'm going to make it just a little bit wider. All right, that's looking good. I can erase away any other lines. That way I don't get confused as I'm working. Okay, so now let's draw in some of those notches in the feather. So in order to do this, I just draw a curved line down and then a curved line back up. And I don't make them symmetrical where I place them. So I'm going to add two right here. And then I can erase away the excess. So there is our feather. So the next thing we're going to do is create a solid shape of our feather now that we've sketched it all out. And this will help us to add in all the different blocks of color that we're going to be using. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I've got my mono weight brush selected. The size of my mono weight brush is 3%. And I'm just going to trace over my sketch layer. Okay, I'm going to drop in color. And as I mentioned before, this is a bit of a more advanced tutorial, so this is one of those advanced methods. We're going to create a selection of the solid shape that we have. So I'm going to tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. I'm going to turn off the visibility of the artwork on this layer, but our selection still exists. You can see those diagonal lines running across. We can keep our sketch layer if we want for reference. I'm just going to leave it on because it helps for us to know where we're going to drop color. We're going to create a brand new layer right above it. I'm going to grab my first color, which is my yellow. I'm going to also grab from the watercolor illustration brush set my medium paint round brush, and I'm just going to start painting out some sections of color. So this top part's going to be yellow, and then I'm going to create a brand new layer right above it. The next part's going to be orange. It's important that you keep these colors separate as you paint them in because we're going to create blends between them with a few different brushes. So the orange is going to come down to about here, and then I'm going to create a brand new layer, and this one's going to be my red layer. And I'm also going to have some red up here and a little bit right here. I'm going to create a brand new layer, grab my pink, paint in a little bit of pink up here, have that go into a brown. New layer, this one's going to be light purple. And then I'm going to create my final layer is going to be my dark purple, which is just going to be down here. Once you have all of your colors blocked off, you can deselect everything. So just hit deselect. We can turn off our sketch layer down here, and now all that's left are our blocks of color. So now we're going to start blending everything together, and this is where it's really going to come to life as watercolor. So I generally start with my darker colors first and then work towards my light colors, because you're going to see the most dramatic changes when you're affecting your dark colors, so then you'll know what you need to do to adjust any light colors at the end. So I'm going to come into where my red is. So come to your red layer. I'm going to grab my smudge brush, so tap on your smudge brush, and I'm going to start with my soft wash brush, so just tap on that, and the size is fairly small. I'm down to 3%, and I'm just going to stipple the edges. And the point of this is that we want to erase this really hard line that we have, and just making a nice softer transition. And then what I also like to do is grab my brush and come down to my dense wash brush and paint this one in with the same color, so with red, and just along this edge. And this is a textured wash brush, so we can maintain the texture along that edge so it doesn't get too soft, but there's also a nice blend, and it makes it look a lot more real. And now you can see the colors are really starting to blend here. As we move through the other dark colored blocks, you'll notice it even more. So I'm still in my red layer. I'm coming back to my soft wash as a smudge brush and just smudging these edges, and then coming back over them, painting with my dense wash brush. So the point of the soft brush is to blend into the color, and then we use the dense wash to maintain texture. So that gets rid of those hard lines, the soft brush does, and then we paint in a nice transition with texture. Now we're going to move to the orange, same process. So I will speed up the video and then I'll be back. Okay, we've got our feather all nicely blended, and the next thing we want to do is just soften up some of these edges. So you can come along the edge using your smudge tool and your spot bleed brush. I'm going to group all of these color blocks together, and then I'm going to duplicate the group. So slide it to the left and choose duplicate. So now I've got the group all layered out on its own if I ever need it in the future, but I need to merge these together. That way it's easier to soften up the exterior edge. So I can uncheck the visibility of the bottom one and then merge this top one together. So just tap on the layer thumbnail and choose flatten. And now these are all combined. So now I can come in with my smudge brush, choose my spot bleed, and then just softly kind of stipple and push the color just to soften that edge. Okay, once you've softened up that edge, now we're going to add in some extra details. So we'll start by adding in our stem first. So create a brand new layer up at the very top, and we're going to grab our dark purple, and we're going to use our sketching pencil brush for this and just draw that line down. The size of this brush is 4%. And to just make it look more hand done, I usually follow the line down a couple of times just to darken it up. Okay, I'm going to create a brand new layer right above it and just add in those extra feather details at the very base. Now we're going to add in some additional details to the feather itself. We'll start by creating some white lines of separation just to define that this is a feather. So we'll create a brand new layer up at the top. We're going to grab white, so double tap where the white is. We're going to grab our round liner brush. I'm going to reduce the size of this brush down to 3%. And I'm just going to, in some areas, not all areas, draw in these details of the feather. And I don't want this to go on top of my stem, so I'm going to drag this behind my stem layer. So I'm right above my merged color layer. And I'll add some up here, just following the contours of the feather. I have the most detail up at the top of this feather. But in some of these sections that are a bit larger, I'm only going to put them in a portion of the section. So the feather is starting to come to life now. We're going to add in some additional details. So we'll start by adding in some dots up at the top. So create a brand new layer at the very top of your layers. I'm going to keep this as white. I'm going to grab my sketching pencil brush, but change the blend mode of this to overlay. So tap on the little N and toggle down until you find overlay. And now we're just going to draw a bunch of ovals that are going to be different sizes. And we're keeping them all up at the top of the feather. They're not going to come all the way through the feather. That's far enough. I'm going to reduce the opacity so they're not so strong. So tap on the little O and drag this down to, let's see, about 75%. Okay, now we're going to add some additional details, some dots to the lower half, but we're going to make these ones dark. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab my dark purple color, and I'm going to grab my soft bloom stamp right here. And the size of this one is 4%. And this one's a pressure sensitive brush. So whenever you're stamping, how much pressure you put down will determine the size of it. So I can put some smaller dots or some larger dots in here. So I want to just change up the size a little bit. So just a few dot details through here. And that's probably pretty good. All right, I'm going to reduce the opacity of this as well. So tap on the little N. I'm going to drag this down to, let's see, 75% again, I think is good. So now we're going to add in some bits and pieces of the feather that maybe broke off from these larger sections. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to make the color of these little pieces similar to whatever color is behind it. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to change the blend mode of this to multiply just so they're a bit darker and they're going to stand out. I'm going to use my round liner brush for this, and I'm going to start out with red right here because I'm going to put one in right in this area. So grab red, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So it's just a mini section of feather and color it in. And I'll put another one right up here. And let's see, maybe one more down here. So we're just adding more texture, more variety, just to make it really interesting. So I'm going to add, let's grab our lighter purple. We'll add one in this area. Wherever you have a section that's feeling like it needs just a little bit of extra detail, maybe it doesn't have a dot or these white lines, then that's a nice place to put it in. Okay, we've got some extra color now. Now I want to just apply a little bit more of our watercolor effects. So I'm going to return down here to our base color layer. Let me label this one base color. And I'm going to select it. So tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. And now I'm going to grab my smudge brush and I'm going to grab my dense wash brush. And I'm just going to push from the outside in and I'm going to affect this edge just to make it seem a little more watercolor-like. And you can see it's starting to pull up some of the color from that edge. And I can do that in a few different places. The next thing we're going to do is apply a few different color blocks within our base color just to change up the variety of color, because right now we have these solid areas of one type of color. So where we have our orange right here, maybe I want a little bit of yellow mixed in within the orange area itself. So this is just adding to all the texture, all the color variety. So I'm going to create a brand new layer right above my base color layer. I'm going to tap on the layer thumbnail and choose clipping mask, so this will be locked inside of that color. I'm going to grab my yellow and I'm going to grab my soft bloom stamp, and I can just stamp in here and add just a little bit of extra color to some of these areas, and that will really make it feel more watercolor-like. So I'm going to grab brown and maybe have the brown extend into this pink color. I'm going to have the pink extend a little further down into the brown. Let's see, we'll add some red down here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so I would call our feather pretty much done now. The one last thing that I want to do is just up the saturation of my base color layer, and that kind of makes all these extra colors really pop and move forward and create an extra sense of depth. So with my base color layer selected, I'm going to come up to my magic wand. I'm going to choose hue, saturation, and brightness, tap on layer, and just drag up the saturation, let's see, to about 60%, I think looks good. And for the brightness, I'm going to actually toggle this down to 45%. So that's all set there. Now we're going to add some paint splatter to the top of it. So create a brand new layer up at the very, very top. I'm going to grab my bleeding splatter brush and I kind of just rotate between some of the colors that I have. So I'm going to start with yellow first, and the size of this brush is 5%. So I'm just going to paint a few splatters on top of it and then switch to some of my other colors. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm just going to do a few of these, and you can also change the size of it as you're splattering as well. Let's do the light purple. Okay, and now we can just add in our lettering. So I'm going to create a brand new layer up at the top. I'm going to grab my round liner brush and my dark purple, and then write out whatever you would like. Okay, let's add a watercolor paper texture on top of everything. So create a brand new layer. We're going to choose black for this, so double tap where the black is, and I'm going to grab the fine tooth paper texture down here at the bottom. Make sure your size is all the way to max and your opacity is at max. I like zooming out of my canvas, and then you're going to paint over in one stroke. Don't lift up your stylus until you're done painting the texture on top. And once you have the texture painted, you're just going to change the blend mode to multiply. And now let's center everything up beneath it. So I'm going to select everything beneath that paper texture and move it into place. So that's how to paint a watercolor feather directly in Procreate. Once again, links to everything mentioned in this tutorial, including the free color palette, are right in the video description. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of new tutorials just like this one in the future. For more Procreate tutorials and freebies, head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com. You can also find me over on Instagram. My handle is everytuesday. If you try this out and post it there, I would love it if you tag me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.